Bassett Theatre in Toronto, Ontario. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame Induction Gala in association with the Canadian International AutoShow. Please welcome your Master of Ceremonies, Norris McDonald.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, my name is Norris McDonald. I write for Toronto Star Wheels, and it's my pleasure, distinct pleasure, to act once again as your Master of Ceremonies. Welcome to the 25th induction ceremony of the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame. It might have been the 26th, but we skipped a year because of negotiations that were taking place between the Hall and the Auto Show that has brought us to this moment tonight. And you'll hear more about that as the evening progresses. Now, anybody who knows me is aware that you put me behind a podium and you put a microphone in front of me, and I can talk for a serious length of time about racers and racing and just about anything else that pops into my head. But not tonight. We have a lot to do. And so without further ado, I'd like to have you welcome to the stage the chairman of the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame Board of Directors, Dr. Hugh Scully.
Thank you, Norris, and ladies and gentlemen, welcome, bienvenue. We're looking forward to, I think, an eventful evening with recognition of many people that have made a very significant contribution to motorsport in Canada. Hall of Fame was started in 1993. Since that time, we have inducted as honorable members over 200 individuals who've made outstanding contributions. And tonight, as Norris leads us through the evening, we're going to recognize several categories that have not been recognized as much in the past. Last year, at a special event, we recognized 10 representatives from the media, which simply hadn't happened before, but if we think about it, without the coverage the media provides, there's no way we'd have the profile, or many of the drivers and promoters would have the profile that they have. In addition, as we go through the evening later, there will be 7 new inductees from Canada, and I'll talk about the international inductee at the end. Obviously, an evening like this is a team effort. There's been a tremendous amount of work that's gone on. And Norris, I think, is going to refer further to the partnership we developed with the Auto Show, which has been very beneficial for us and hopefully for them. Very briefly, I'd like to identify some of the people on the board of directors who are sitting among you. Not in any particular order. There's John McGill, Peter Lockhart, Norris himself, Robin Virtue, Michael Taylor, Jeff Atkinson, Denis Cadet, Nicole Lassalle, who is not here tonight, but I would, for a racing organization, point out that we now have a woman on our board, Joel Robinson, Greg McPherson, and I have the honor of being the chair and keeping us all straight over the time, and with me for as long as I've been the chair, since 2011, Sid Priddle, our general manager. Norris, let me turn this back to you, and we look forward to a very good evening and meeting some wonderful people. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh. As mentioned, there is a new relationship between the Hall and the International, the Canadian International Hall. Let me try this again. Canadian International Auto Show. You know, you get your tongue twisted around Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame and Canadian International Auto Show. So from now on, I'll just say the Hall and the Show, and we'll get that one straightened out. There's a new relationship. The Hall, as mentioned by Dr. Scully, was founded in 1993, and many people have been inducted, and frankly, if you went out and talked to people on the street, the Hall is not well known. The Auto Show, several years ago, started to pay more attention to racing as far as extra added attractions here at Canada's largest consumer show. We did 50 years of F1 a couple of years ago. Prior to that, we did 100 years of Indianapolis. And this year, of course, we are saluting McLaren Racing. And so it's a natural fit. And to talk a little bit more about it, I would like to introduce you to the General Manager of the Canadian International Auto Show to say a few words, Jason Campbell. Jason?
Thanks very much, Norris. It's been a pleasure working, and not only with you, as we have for all those years, but also working with the board of the Hall of Fame. I'd like to say thank you very much to, in particular, Dr. Scully and his very capable team that has agreed to embark on this new collaboration with us. Pfaff McLaren, who have been playing a very big role in terms of pulling together this year's celebration events, as well as Francois Dumontier and his team at the Canadian Grand Prix, all of whom have collectively been able to attract some leading lights, legends in our sport and leaders in our sport here to Toronto and join with us for this celebration. We had a great kickoff for this week-long automotive celebration when we hosted this last Wednesday, three-time Indy 500 winner Johnny Rutherford, our newly honored hometown hero Ron Fellows, and Formula One Managing Director of Motorsports Ross Brawn for the induction of McLaren Racing into the international category of the Hall of Fame. I think those of you who were there on the night will agree that it was a very special evening to have such big names and our industry gathering together and sharing their thoughts so fulsomely over the course of the evening and celebrating the achievements of Canadian motorsports in such a manner, in a way that we can all take pride in. Because they, like Mario Andretti and Craig Jackson the year before, came here not because of us as the auto show, but because of you and all the achievements that you guys have, traditions that you have built in Canadian motorsport over the years. I hope some of you had a chance to see the display in the room just behind here, celebrating the international inductee this year, McLaren Racing. I think the room tells a great story of the legends of motorsport and their contribution to the Canadian racing scene and the establishment, and will be, I'm sure, one of the big hits of the show and one of our fan favorites here. And the new association will, for the benefit of both parties, I think, be a great association, and hopefully will be the start of great traditions as we go forward year on year. So we look forward to great things from tonight, great things from our association for years to come, and thank you very much for this association, all of you.
Thank you, Jason. Jason is really our host for this evening, so it's delightful that we're here. Now, the Hall of Fame has several promotions each year to raise funds, and one of them, frankly, I think is the most fun, is the annual Celebration of Speed at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. And I would ask Peter Lockhart, an honorable member of the Hall, to come to the stage to speak about that celebration. Peter?
Thank you, Norris. I think we're going to have a little video here while I'm speaking. Hello, everyone. First of all, I'd like to say congratulations to all of this year's deserving Hall of Fame inductees. Great that you're here. I'm pleased to be co-chairing the Hall of Fame Celebration of Speed event once again this year with my incredibly organized co-chair, Robin Virtue. Robin is also a director, as mentioned, of the Hall of Fame. This year will mark our 10th anniversary of this event, which has provided a lot of exciting experiences for a lot of people. Hall of Fame member Ron Fellows has once again graciously provided us with the use of the historic Grand Prix circuit at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, and for the event, which will be held on Monday, August 3rd of this year. It's a world-class racetrack, and we are grateful to hold the event there. We can't think of another place that would provide our guests with the thrill and excitement that Canadian Tire Motorsport Park does. The celebration of speed offers the opportunity for guests to take the ride of their lives with highly skilled and experienced drivers in a wide variety of super fast, exotic, and expensive race cars, and street cars, like the ones that you may be seeing on the screen behind me at this moment. Full details will soon be up on the celebrationofspeed.ca website, along with the Hall's website, and ticketing for this year's event will commence in April. We hope to see you all there on August the 3rd, and certainly all of our new inductees should be initiated with a ride with my good friend Scott Samuel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter, and it really is a fun day. If you haven't been out, I urge you to go out to a Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, or CTMP, as it's known, and you can take your own car out there, by the way, or you can get into a car with Scott Goodyear or Ludwig Heimrath, who's here tonight, or some of the other great Canadian race car drivers. Now, I wonder if we can put the house lights up just for a couple of moments, because I would like to recognize a couple of people, and I would also like to introduce some members of the Hall of Fame who have been inducted previously. Sid Priddle, who is our general manager, and Sid and his family, Jerry and Betty, his wife, are acknowledged as the preeminent promoters of motorsport events in North America, not just Canada, for many years. And it's been my pleasure to have worked with Sid and his family for some time, and it's always been a pleasure. I mentioned him a moment ago. Where is Ludwig Heimrath? There we go. You want magic names when it comes to Canadian motorsport. His leads the list. Dr. Scully, of course. John McGill. Is John here? Where is my good friend Brian Stewart? He's just going to wave. Stand up, my friend. But my wife couldn't make the celebration tonight, so Brian's my date. Peter Lockhart, who was just here a moment ago. Ralph Lucio. There's Ralph at the back. Roger Pert. I saw Roger here. Where is Roger? There's Roger. Roger has been running Canadian motorsport for years, and it's delightful to see you here tonight, sir. I don't think, I've got a list here, but I'm not sure that any of the others are here, so if I've missed anybody, I apologize. And then there's a couple of people who are here that I would like to recognize. Sherry Putnam, who's the series director for the NASCAR Pinty Series. Sherry, where are you? Albert O is here tonight. He is the owner of the car that Parker Thompson drove in the Canadian Touring Car Championship last year. Also was the owner of the Audi that finished third in class at Daytona in the 24-hour race this year. Daniel Morad was one of the drivers. Mr. O, are you here? And there we go. And last but not least, this man was in Daytona, Florida last night and actually slept on a bench waiting for his plane to board this morning. He flew back so he can be here tonight. The second man, the second Canadian to make the field for the Daytona 500, Jim Bray. Where's Jimmy? Okay, now we are going to get down to business. Induction to the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame is not easy. First, an individual has to be nominated. It is not Contrary to public opinion, it is not the job of the board of directors to find candidates. That is up to the motorsport community. And nominations are made, and there's a rigorous process here too. You can't fill out a ballot and say, Buddy was a great guy, let's get him in. There has to be a record of accomplishment. In any event, those who are nominated are vetted by a nomination committee as to an individual's eligibility, and then the nominations are passed on to a selection committee where the final selections are made. Now, some years there have been more than 10 people selected. Other years there have been fewer than 10. This year, counting the induction of McLaren Racing in the international category, there are 8. However, I mentioned the international category, and as Dr. Scully mentioned previously, the Hall determined that some newspaper and electronic reporters should be honored for their contributions to the growth of the sport in the country. And so the media category was established and 10 media members selected. They were named to the Hall just as negotiations commenced that led to the working relationship now in effect between the Hall and the Auto Show, and so a full-fledged induction ceremony was not held in 2019. This explains, I hope, why the reporters are being inducted tonight along with the class of 2020. Now, some of our media inductees are no longer with us, unfortunately. Dr. Scully will accept on their behalf. And I would ask each of the reporters being inducted tonight to come forward following the playing of a short video about their careers and to be inducted either by me or someone of their choosing. I would ask them also to say a few words with the emphasis on the word few. Our first media inductee, the voice of Canadian motorsport, Eric Thomas.
Eric Thomas continues to host and produce Raceline Radio, a weekly syndicated radio show that airs across Canada. Thomas has been hosting and producing the program for over 25 years. He's also worked as a track announcer at Merivale and Bransonville Speedways, anchored TV coverage in Canada and the U.S., and reported from the pits for IndyCar races on ESPN and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Radio Network. Please welcome Eric Thomas to the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame.
You think he's deadly with a microphone.
Oh.
I got to put on these because getting old sucks. Well, I get out my other prop. Here we go. Got to be quick here. Yeah, here we go. Norris, you said it's restricted to 3 to 4 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes?
You know something? This is an important moment in everybody's life.
All right. I got my stopwatch. You ready? You hear the beep?
If you go a little over, it's okay.
Okay. Well, as legend and fellow Canadian Motorsport Hall of Famer Jackie Stewart might say, it's a great, great day for a motor car race and a Hall of Fame induction. Anytime you see Norris McDonald in a tuxedo, you know you're in big trouble. And of course, everyone's favorite physician, Dr. Hugh Scully, still waiting for that call from ABC for the guest spot on Grey Anatomy. Don't call us Doc. We'll call you. Now be nice, Jackie. Well, all right. Don't ever trust anybody wearing a kilt. Gary Magwood, right? Anyway, we were talking about timing. I'd have to say it was perfect timing when we launched Raceline Radio in 1992, and here we are on the air across Canada 28 years later. In the early 90s, other Hall of Famers were at the top of their game. I think we all remember. Scott Goodyear, a hero at Indianapolis, Ron Fellows and Paul Tracy making headlines. And at the same time, another Canadian Motorsport Hall of Famer, Bruce Mellenbacher, and his partner, the late John Massingberg, already on the air with our Raceline Motorsport television series on TSN, asked me if I had any thought to a companion radio show. My immediate response, does Pinocchio have a wooden ass? I mean, our drivers are doing great things. The Indy here in Toronto and IndyCar in general at the top of the world. What a perfect time to launch a national radio show. Program director Alan Davis at then CJCL 1430 Toronto was smart enough to know that our sport deserved the same treatment as the NHL Leafs, Major League Baseball's Blue Jays, CFL Argos, and he puts us on the air. But Alan warned us that the show had to be slick, it had to be fast and highly produced, and I'm proud to say that it still is. But I remember when we announced that Raceline Radio was going to be an hour-long, critics hissed, an hour? Where are you going to find enough information to talk about racing for an hour? Well, the truth of the matter is, we could use 2 hours, and sometimes even 3, to cover it all. From one station in Toronto to a current network of 15 across Canada, 17 airings a week year-round, reaching in excess of 175,000 listeners per week. I remember our very first guest, NASCAR TV legend and broadcast pioneer Ken Squire, who proclaimed that our show format was, in his words, right on the nickel. And happy to say Ken was proven right, because the timing was right. On the nickel, well, we entered Raceline Radio that year in the National Motorsport Press Association's annual media contest, and in our very first year on the air, we beat the live radio call of the Indianapolis 500. So proud of that right out of the gate. Thank you. Timing, yes. And we rode the very fact that Canada produces some of the very best drivers in our sport. You see, it's pretty simple. We don't have to travel too far from home to talk to the very best. Many of them enshrined in this very Hall of Fame. So who do we thank? I'm getting down to the end, Norris. Our sponsors and broadcast partners, certainly those who knew there was value in this show and in this sport to help them sell product. Our friends and presenting partners at Subaru Canada, Inc. have been with us from show one, all 28 years and counting. Sponsor support like that is extremely rare in our sport. We owe so very much to Subaru Canada. Continental Tire and their General Tire brand are with us now as well, and the partnership is already showing tremendous dividends. To the other blue chip companies that have partnered with us and Raceline Radio over 28 years nationally, and all the sponsors at the affiliate level, thank you, my friends. To the network affiliates, yes, the program directors and staff, many still with us since we grew to network size, thank you for having so much faith in us. And of course, my family. I'm very fortunate that Miss Janice grew up in the sport. Her dad co-owned Merrittville and Ransomville Speedways in Niagara, Western New York. She grew up making popcorn, making hot dogs, graduated to the tower to score races, and I announced those races at those tracks, and that's where we met. Daughter Caitlin, who is here with us tonight, had no choice but to be caught up in this wacky game, kept her tradition alive, scoring herself at those same speedways. I love you all very, very dearly. None of this would have been possible without your understanding of this sport's ridiculous demands. Thank you for the nomination, Mr. Bruce Mellenbacher. It is an honor and a privilege to be inducted into the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame, along with you, your family, and all of the other inductees tonight, and all of those who have stood on this stage before us. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric. And you know, the 2 to 3 minutes really is just a guideline. As I was saying to the inductees backstage before the show started tonight, which incidentally is being live streamed onto the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame website, I said that we really didn't want to get too carried away. The record for an acceptance speech, and I mean a real record, is held by stock car racer Rolly McDonald of Pictou County, Nova Scotia, who talked for 50 minutes and reviewed every race he started. By the way, we do have a hook here tonight, though, just in case. Our next inductee from the media is Jeff Papone.
Jeff Papone has written about motorsports in Canada for the past 2 decades, starting at the Montreal Gazette and the Can West newspaper chain. He was a motorsport reporter and columnist for the Globe and Mail for 16 years before joining Inside Track Motorsport News as a Formula One correspondent. Please welcome Jeff Papone to the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame.
Okay. I didn't prepare remarks, but you said 50 minutes. I think I can beat
It's
that.
okay.
The first thing I want to say is the media category was introduced last year, but before that happened, the man on the stage here, Norris McDonald, was the first media ever inducted in the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame, and I think that deserves recognition.
Thank you.
The reason that deserves recognition is that Norris has been a mentor to a lot of media in this country, and a lot of people who have looked up to him, have met him and understood how great a reporter he is, but he's also willing to help everyone out. This is one of these things where I was talking earlier about being bittersweet, because there's someone, Dean McNulty, who was the same kind of person, who's being inducted today, and he's no longer with us. Another person of that stature was Graham Jones, who's also being inducted tonight and who is no longer with us. And it makes this a little bittersweet, because I would like more than ever to have them on the stage and have this honor as we are having. I'm really not sure what to say apart from that, but I got into motorsport reporting by accident, so I think I did okay. The other thing I wanted to say is that people like Norris make this special, but the other thing that makes this really interesting tonight is one of the first drivers I ever wrote about was a young racer from Saint-Hippolyte, Quebec, named Bruno Spangler, who's being inducted tonight as well. So that makes this even more special. I think this is a great sport. You meet a lot of people, you do a lot of really interesting things, and you need a lot of support to do that. You get that from people like Norris, people like Graham Jones, people like Dean McNulty, people like Bruno Spangler, and of course your family. My wife Joanna and my son Nico have missed, I've missed a lot of times with them. I've missed a lot of birthday parties because Nico was born on the night of the Indy 500. So, and every year, every few years, his birthday falls on the day of the Indy 500. So he understands, and we move his birthday party around. So thank you very much for that, and thank you very much for this.
Let me say this about Jeff Papone. He is a stupendous talent. Nobody works harder at being a motorsport reporter than Jeff does. He is one of these people who is relentless about making contacts so that if something happens and a story's got a hole and it needs a quote, he's able to make the phone call and to fill it in. And all of us admire him. Pardon me, and really it's a pleasure to know him. And one other thing, we go to Indianapolis together, and he goes home on Friday night because although he might stand up here and talk with a degree of bravado about missing his kids' birthday parties, he never does. And I find that admirable. Our next media inductee is Gerald Donaldson.
Gerald Gerald Donaldson covered hundreds of Formula One Grand Prix events for multiple publications, including the Globe and Mail and the Toronto Star. He was also involved in broadcasting for the CBC, CTV, and TSN, and has written many books about F1, including biographies about Juan Manuel Fangio, James Hunt, and Gilles Villeneuve. Please welcome Gerald Donaldson to the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame.
Well, thank you very much. This is a great honor for me. A year ago at Monza, I was inducted into the Formula One Media Hall of Fame. But I think this is more important to me because it's always been great to be able to report from afar the Formula One events to a Canadian audience. It's been 43 years this year since I started. It was a British Grand Prix in July of 1977, which happened to be the debut of Gilles Villeneuve in the third McLaren. But I was there actually to do a story on Walter Wolff's team, which was quite successful in the beginning. So a long time, I ran away with the circus, as they say, the Formula One circus. I've enjoyed every minute of it. A bit of pain involved, sometimes dealing with difficult drivers. And I sometimes call this Formula One racing, it's like a fast-paced soap opera. There's a lot of arguing and disagreements behind the scenes, but that's what we like as journalists. You can write about it. But you have to be careful. When someone like Bernie Ecclestone was in charge, which he no longer is, he would call you out if he thought you were bringing the sport into disrepute. But so we have new owners, Liberty Media, which is appropriate. It's the world's largest media company. And it was my pleasure 2 nights ago to sit with their motorsport boss, Ross Brawn, who's one of the most interesting characters in the motorsport, in world motorsport, really. And anyway, I'm nearly on the 3-minute mark.
It's okay.
I'd like to thank Norris MacDonald, who's always been a help to me, and Hugh and all the board for voting me in. And thank you very much.
Jerry and I always meet for brunch downtown a couple of times a year, and then I get to write my annual Formula One preview column, and I really don't have to do much because I just turn on the recorder, and then I have to transcribe what Jerry says, and then of course we have to have a friendly bet on who's going to win the World Championship, and we kind of trade the win because one of us is going to say Hamilton, and the other one always says Vettel. And so between the two of them, we're usually pretty close. Our next media inductee is Pierre Lecour.
Pierre Lecour covered motorsports for over 30 years for Le Journal de Montréal. He introduced Gilles Villeneuve to a sponsor, allowing Villeneuve to enter the 1976 Grand Prix de Trois-Rivières, which in turn launched his Formula One career. He wrote a book about the Villeneuves titled Gilles and Jacques de Villeneuve and Me. Please welcome Pierre Lecour to the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame.
Now, unfortunately, Pierre is ill and unable to attend, but I can remember him particularly during the years that players was involved in motorsport, and Pierre would be at the Molson Indy races in Toronto and Vancouver, and he was always a giant among the men in the media room. And it's a shame he can't be with us here tonight, but he will receive his plaque. Our next inductee is Dean McNulty.
Dean McNulty, who passed away last April, covered motorsport for nearly 2 decades for the Sun Media and later Post Media newspaper chains. He was known for his coverage of NASCAR's National Series, but also covered everything from grassroots racing to Formula One. Post Media dropped racing coverage when McNulty retired, making him the last full-time motorsports reporter at the national level. Please welcome Dean McNulty to the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame.
Well, as Jeff Papone said, Dean passed away last spring, and it was a humongous loss for our profession and for newspaper coverage of motorsport. Dean didn't want to retire, and he would tell us in the press room at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, "I don't want to quit, because if I do, they're not going to cover car racing anymore." And unfortunately, he was right. Not that there is not motorsport coverage in the Sun Media and Post Media newspapers, but they don't have someone on the beat like Dean was. And he was just such a delight to work with, because he was one of the few reporters whose employer would actually send him to races. Jeff and some of the others of us would be able to get together once a year in Indianapolis for dinner, but that was about the extent that the budgets of the companies that we worked for would go so far as the coverage of international motorsport. And you know, the nice thing about Dean was he never lorded it over anybody, because if you've ever seen the hockey and the baseball writers, they like to one-up each other, and but not Dean. And he would come back and he would tell us the latest gossip from the NASCAR paddock or the IndyCar paddock, and as he would hit the punchline, his eyes would just flash with enthusiasm. And it was really just a delight to have known the man and to have worked beside him for many years. And we miss him terribly. And we will send his plaque off to his wife, Roxanne, who unfortunately couldn't come tonight. But the message I hope will get through to her was that we loved him and we miss him. Our next media inductee is Dave Franks.
Dave Franks, to this day, photographs racers and racing, particularly at short tracks across Ontario. His photos have been published in racing newspapers and magazines, including Area Auto Racing News, Speedway Scene, National Speed Sport News, and Inside Track Motorsport News. Franks has been taking photos for over half a century, including many from the early days where photos would not exist without him. Please welcome Dave Franks to the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame.
Well, first of all, this is a great honor, and I'd like to congratulate all the inductees. I'm very, very honored, and I'm glad of one thing. At my age, and I might look young, but I'm glad they're doing it while I'm still on the planet to accept the accolations and so on. So that's a good thing. Going back to about 1981, I happened to be photographing the NASCAR boys in Daytona, and this brings good memories for me. And I'm there, I photographed them, ran to Orlando, got the pictures developed. I'm back at the track the next day, and I want to get them autographed. So I see Cal Yarborough. Cal, come here. He comes over and he says, yeah, Dave, what can I do for you? Well, he knows it's Dave because it says Dave on my shirt. And then it's Buddy Baker. Bud, come here. A voice next to me says, don't talk to him like that. That's Buddy Baker. I know who it is, I said to him. And so when that was done, he hands me his business card. And I look at it, and he says, I'm starting a new division back home in Canada called CASCAR. And I said to him, you know, it just came out of me, what's that, NASCAR spelt wrong? And it was Tony Novotny. And he says, I need a photographer. And was I taken back? Wow, you want a guy that talks like that? Come here, Cal, what do you want? And that's where kind of got me all started, and I'm very honored, and I want to thank the Hall of Fame people for doing this, and I'm just so glad you did it while I'm still here, and all the best. Thank you.
You know, I'm going to tell you this about Dave Franks. I have never, thank you, Dave, I've never met a more enthusiastic guy as far as motorsport is concerned. He just loves getting out there, taking those pictures. And of course, his great pal, Don Biederman, you saw the two of them together and spelled trouble, let me tell you that. Great times, great memories. Our next inductee is Tim Miller.
Tim Miller has been a motorsports reporter and columnist for the Hamilton Spectator for the past 35 years after leaving general reporting to focus on motorsports with wheelspin news in the late 70s. Miller has covered everything from local short tracks to major series such as the American Le Mans Series, IndyCar, and Formula One. He's written several books about racing and occasionally branched into public relations. Please welcome Tim Miller to the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame.
Good evening, everyone. When Dr. Scully called me a little over a year ago regarding my induction, I was gobsmacked. This is indeed an honor. There are some I wish were here tonight. Wally, Nate, Bob Slack. Auto racing has a small but passionate following in Canada. Over the years, I've tried to present racing in a positive manner, focusing on local racing and the people who make the racing happen. I want to thank the Hamilton Spectator for allowing me into its readers' homes. More thanks to other publications such as the Toronto Star, Inside Track Motorsport News, and the now gone Wheelspin News for giving me a platform to ply my trade. And I want to thank Margie and my children for allowing me to indulge in my passion and for the many, many weekends I spent covering motorsport. To the executive and the board of directors of the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame, thank you for this honor. It is truly appreciated.
You know, one of the nicest things I've seen in this business is when Tim Miller was named a year ago to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. It showed how much the Hamilton Spectator appreciated him because, and they don't do this sort of, newspapers don't do this sort of thing for people, particularly when they're still alive. And that great big front page article about Tim and his career and how much he had meant to the Spectator. And I think that's really special. And you saw in that little tribute in the video up there, one of the nice things with Tim writes about the local racers, but has this incredible knack of, even on the big international reports that he writes, of getting a local angle. And he's way ahead of the rest of us when it comes to that. So thank you for being my friend, too. Our next inductee is Graham Jones, and we have a very special video tribute that will follow the one we have produced.
Graham Jones moved to England to pursue his passion for motorsports and riding, working in editing roles for Cars and Car Conversions magazine and Autocar in the 1980s. He returned to Canada to become a motorsports writer and columnist for the Toronto Star in 1988, before going back to England 2 years later to work in automotive public relations. Jones was the editor of Race Car Engineering magazine when he passed away in 2011. Please welcome Graham Jones to the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame.
Hi everyone, I just wanted to give my warm wishes and my happiness, I suppose, to Graham Jones tonight being inducted into the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame. 2002, my first year in Formula One, I needed a warm guy, I needed a calculating guy, and I needed a real cool guy to be around in my first year in Formula One, and I thoroughly enjoyed working with Graham as my PR manager at McNulty, and we enjoyed a tremendous relationship. After that time, obviously we all know Graham. He was very humble, he was very down to earth, had an incredible knowledge of the cars and motorsport in general. So very, very good Canadian, a great export for you guys, and I hope everyone has a sensational evening. All the best.
Unfortunately, Graham passed away, and his family isn't here tonight. We will make sure that they get the plaque. It's really kind of interesting how Graham came to the Toronto Star. There was a proposal made that the sports department actually hire a full-time motorsport writer. To that point in time, Frank Orr, the great hockey writer, had doubled as a motorsport writer in the off-season. And the attitude was, well, it's not motorsport really isn't a full-time job. And the late Dennis Morgan, the founder of Toronto Star Wheels, made a deal with the sports editor that if they would pay half of Graham's salary, Wheels would pay the other half. And between the two of them, they could hire a full-time guy. And that happened. But at the end of the day, Graham really wanted to be where the home of motor racing was, back in England, and our loss was their gain. Our next media inductee is Len Coates.
Len Coates started as a sports copy editor at the Toronto Telegram in the mid-1960s before becoming Canada's first motorsports reporter. He also wrote for the Toronto Star, held a media relations role at Mosport Park, and was the founding president of the Automobile Journalists Association of Canada. Please welcome Len Coates to the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame.
Dr. Scully will say a few words.
Len Coates was a very close friend, and there are two things about Len and his relationship that perhaps you don't know. Firstly, family not able to be here, but very appreciative. Len undertook to describe in detail what some of us were trying to do in motorsport medicine and safety. Followed me around, we went to different circuits, wrote stories about it, and promoted it, and without any question from that media aspect was very helpful in being able to advance all of the things we've done in motorsport medicine and safety from the beginning. The other thing that happens is that there is an annual award at the graduation in the Ryerson School of Journalism. At 3 levels, there is a Len Coates Award, which is Ryerson way of recognizing one of their early graduates who is so prominent and made such a contribution. Very good contribution to motorsport.
Now I'll tell you about Len Coates. He worked hard, he played hard, he loved hard, and particularly the latter two. And the story goes, it's true, checked it out with a number of people. Len was selected along with Sid Priddle by Molson to promote the first Molson Indy back in 1986. And the general manager of that first race was Brent Imlock, the son of the legendary Maple Leaf coach Punch Imlock. And Brent was working with Molson at the time and insisted that there was a daily management meeting that started sharp at 7 o'clock in the morning. And he rapped knuckles if you weren't there. And everybody would always make it except Len Coates. Finally, one morning, as Len dragged himself into the room at 7:30 or so, Brent looked at him and said, "Len, this meeting starts at 7 o'clock. And Len said, "You know, Brent, till I started working here, I didn't know there were 2 7 o'clocks in a day." Well, I try. Our last media inductee is Dan Proudfoot.
Dan Proudfoot was the first motorsport beat reporter for the Globe and Mail in the early 1970s, where he also covered hockey. He wrote for the Hamilton Spectator, Toronto Telegram, UPI Wire Service, and the Toronto Sun as well. He won an early award for a story in Toronto Life magazine about attending his first racing school. Please welcome Dan Proudfoot to the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame.
Potentially, this is 50 minutes, but it ain't going to happen. I loved covering stock cars at Speedway Park for the Hamilton Spectator in '65, and I loved my last year covering IndyCar and the Canadian Grand Prix for the Sun. It was a wonderful experience for me because I grew up loving car racing. Maybe the highest points for me were some IndyCar weekends. I'm thinking of Long Beach, but memory may not be correct on this, but what was correct was that Paul Tracy might win the IndyCar race. Ron Fellows would take the Trans Am. Greg Moore, Indy Lights. Patrick Carpentier, the Atlantic race, and there weren't any other races. Now, this was definitely the best of times, and what would happen in the press room afterwards as all of us started writing our race stories, but they were mostly Americans since it was in Long Beach, my colleague from the Star, Rick Matsumoto, would at some point taunt, saying, "We've got the best beer, too." But I have to say, a whole lot, probably most of the stories that I wrote over those years were about Canadian drivers whose careers were stalled at a certain point because they did not have the money to advance. I remember well Alan Berg calling at the Sun in, I guess, 1987, early 87, while he was making the rounds of corporate offices looking for somebody who would sponsor him in what would have been his second year in Formula One. I remember he opened his briefcase and there was all kinds of letters in there, and he showed me some of them. The one I remember was from Brabham saying that they had a seat for him in 1987 if he could come up with a certain amount of sponsorship. Of course, you'd all remember he had a pretty miserable year at Osella, but he was able to show enough that there were teams that wanted him, and it didn't happen. He didn't get that sponsorship. But the thing is, Alan Berg didn't quit. He made a life for himself, subsequently, racing in Mexico. He found some place where he could get the sponsorship to race. He won championships there. He continues in the sport today with his well-known racing school at Laguna Seca. He richly deserves his spot in this Hall of Fame tonight. I salute the many Canadian racers I've known who got to that certain point and encountered frustration. I'm thinking of guys like Brian Stewart and Danny Burrett, many others who had almost the talent, enough of the talent, but not enough of the opportunity. They raced internationally, but were frustrated. Thing is, what I've noticed about Canadian racers is that they have a level of determination and hunger unrivaled among drivers from other countries, and this is why they go on, I think. Scott Maxwell beat Paul Tracy in Formula Ford, but Scott's father, George, couldn't match Tony Tracy's resources in boosting the son's career, and so Scott was only able to persevere as Paul Tracy went on to stardom. What's happened though? Scott Maxwell never stopped driving, and he's driving to this day for Motomatic. He's won his class at Le Mans. He's won championships. He did not quit. Hats off to the sponsors who did back Canadian drivers over the years. Labatt's in the case of Gilles Villeneuve, Jim O'Donnell, and Mackenzie Financial with so many drivers, but most remarkably Ron Fellows and Scott Goodyear. The tobacco companies and players in particular. Canadian Tire still very much involved. But the thing is, our early heroes, Ludwig Heimrath, John Coates, Epi Wieses, Bill Brack, Horst Kroll, earned their way into the Hall of Fame with talent and determination that made up for their rivals' sponsorship. It seems right now to me we've returned to the bad old days with the absence of sponsors, the absence of opportunity. There'll always be a place for the driver with remarkable talent, such as Bruno Spangler, who I'm very pleased is here and entering the Hall of Fame. But meantime, we wait for another Gilles Villeneuve who will open the doors and turn the attention of the racing world to Canada. I believe we will prevail. I wait to see if Stroll, Latifi have the hunger and the determination to advance in Formula One, as I hope. James Hinchcliffe to find another ride so he can win that Indy 500. Our guys can do it. We've seen that, and I salute them. Thank you.
Well, I was going to tell a Dan Proudfoot story, but how can you beat that? By the way, before we move on, I do have to thank a couple of people. It was earlier in my script here, which I managed to slip past, probably around the time that I was trying to get my tongue around Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame and Canadian International AutoShow. But the person who's been doing the voiceover for the Hall of Fame inductions for years has been Eric Thomas, and the guy writing the scripts has been Tim Miller. So I would like you to give a round of applause to those two guys, as well as we owe a big vote of thanks to Dave Bradley, who's a motorsport speedway and circuit announcer of note, and we hear him on some of these videos here tonight. That concludes then our 2019 induction, which was our media category group. At the end of the evening, if all of you who have been inducted tonight can plan to come to the stage for a group picture, it would be appreciated. But we will now move on to this year's inductees. The first person to be inducted this year is Alan Berg.
A native of Vancouver, now living in Calgary, this inductee started his illustrious road racing career in karting, winning provincial titles in 1979 and 1980 before climbing into a Formula Ford. After a stint driving in the North American Atlantic Series, he ventured abroad, competing in the British Formula 3 Series against the likes of Martin Brundle and legend Ayrton Senna. This led to the top, Formula One, where he drove for the Osella Alfa Romeo team in 9 races in the 1986 season. With no Canadian Grand Prix at the time, plus the needed funding, our inductee returned to North America to compete in Trans Am with a Porsche 962C. He was also a team driver in the 1990 24 Hours of Le Mans with Richard Lloyd Racing. For the rest of the decade, he returned to open-wheel racing, successfully competing in Formula 2 and Formula 3 in the Mexican F3 and Corona Cup Series. He eventually became involved with the business side of racing with various managerial and coaching roles in Formula Atlantic, Formula Renault, and Transnet Racing. In 2007, he launched his own driving school at Laguna Seca in California. He continues to this day, designing school courses, authoring their content, coordinating the logistics, and selecting and training instructors for high performance and competition, as well as chief instructor duties. Please welcome to the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame, Alan Berg.
And Alan will be inducted by his son, Alexander.
Well, good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to congratulate all of my fellow inductees this evening. It's a great honor and privilege to be here and be amongst all of you and be invited into this great presentation. When I was contacted by Hugh Scully, Dr. Scully, a few months ago, I didn't really have the impact of what this means to be part of this institution. But over the past couple of months leading up to this, as the news got around, I was contacted and congratulated by a number of different people that had been involved with my racing career and my school over the years, and it was very gratifying to hear the stories that came out from these people, that they remembered my my career. And it actually, not only being a part of this is special for me, but of having all those people contact me and bring back my own memories of my racing, that for racing drivers, what's in the past is in the past and you're thinking forward. To be able to relive some of those memories through those contacts is very special for me. And of course, having my son and my wife here to be part of this as well too, because my career started well before they were in my life, and it's really great to have them here tonight. So very special time for us. I have to say, this whole weekend has been just spectacular, going through the auto show and looking at the McLaren display. And I think the only way that it could be improved upon is if the Calgary Flames were here playing tonight as well too, and decimating the Toronto Maple Leafs like they do every single time. So I'm the one receiving the award here tonight. So this is going to be a one-way conversation, okay? So first and foremost, I'd like to recognize my mother and father who helped me get my start in my racing career many, many years ago, obviously, but I wouldn't be here without their support to be able to get started. And my dad once told me early in my career, he said, Alan, when you're out there in the track, I'm always riding with you. He's riding here with us tonight, and he also rides with my son Alexander when he's out karting in his budding racing career. Now, one person that I think is obviously such a big part of our sport and big influence to us was Gilles Villeneuve. And I was there in, I think it was 1981, 1982, I don't remember the year, but it was the year when it was raining, and Gilles Villeneuve at the start was running in about third or fourth place, and he ran into the back of, I think it was Jacques Levit's car, and knocked his wing loose. I actually was standing on top of a trailer, a transporter, at the hairpin when that happened. And I saw, first of all, when he made contact with the car, and the wing was knocked up in front of him, blocking his view. So we all thought that the race was over. He went around for another couple of laps, and in that same corner, under braking, the wing came off. It came up and hit him in the head. He's driving a race car in the rain at 180, 200 miles an hour going into the hairpin. And he still made the corner. He got on the brakes, he ran a little wide, but he carried on. But after that, we all thought, he's done. He's either going in the pits to get a new nose installed, or he's going to be pulling out of the race. But Gilles carried on. And I think what he had done is he adjusted the brake balance to the back to compensate for the fact that he lost his front wing, and he drove the rest of that Grand Prix using his sheer car control abilities. And seeing that just made an impression on me of what a great racing driver he was. I had a chance to meet Gilles a couple of years after that, well, very shortly after that, I suppose, and only had met him for probably 2 minutes. I was quaking in my boots meeting Gilles Villeneuve at that time, and he's very gracious to me, very kind fellow. But Gilles Villeneuve had a huge impact on my career, and I think it's thanks to, institutions and events such as like this that we can remember and keep the legacy of those great drivers still running with us. So I've got a few more to go here. Excuse me. It's going to carry on for a little bit. When I first got involved with racing, my father and I met John McGill, who's here tonight. John, at that point in time, was the president of the CASC, Canadian Automobile Sports Club. And shortly after that, John retired out of that position. And I don't know if that was coincidence or if we had something to do with it, but John was involved with my career early on. Roger Peart, who was president of ASN Canada for many years. Frankly, I was frightened of Roger as a young man when he was driving. I remember my very first race at Ile Notre Dame. I was racing in the Formula Ford category in the support race, and on the Thursday before the race, everybody started to get onto the track. And it was raining, and there was Formula Ford drivers, Formula One drivers out there in the rental cars, supposedly to do a couple of laps to learn the track. It quickly escalated way out of control. And Roger came onto the track, and he politely asked the Formula One drivers to leave. And then he told the rest of us to get the hell out of there, get off the racetrack. So I remember that. And I'd like to thank Mr. Peart for his contribution to motorsport that he's had over all of these years. Thank you, sir. Now, is Paul Cook here tonight? He's not here, so I thought so. I wanted to check, 'cause I didn't really think it's good to speak sarcastically about somebody behind their back, but since it is Paul, I think that you would probably all agree with me that would be okay, right? Yeah. So Paul is the former, or I think still president of ASN Canada, and he'd been involved with motorsports for many, many years throughout my career, but and at a lot of different races. Paul and I really started to get to know each other when I did a couple of seasons in the Players Challenge Series, and we had many long discussions after the events in the stewards room together. And as a result of those meetings, I'm proud to say that for that 2-year period, I single-handedly financially maintained ASN Canada through the fines that I paid thanks to Paul. Pardon me? Yeah, that's right. Also, during my career, I would get the occasional phone call from Paul. And when Paul came on the phone, my reaction was usually, oh God, it's Paul Cook. Have any of you ever had a phone call from Paul do you have that kind of reaction? But the phone calls with Paul would always start, Alan, we got a situation here. And it was always something that naturally I had to work out. And the thing is with Paul, with his vast experience in motorsport, he always had the solution. But he'd never tell you what it is. You had to work it out for yourself. But that's part of being a racer. I think that the thing about being a racer is you have to be able to come up with solutions. And that's one of those things that Paul helped me learn over the course of my racing career with his involvement. So it's too bad Paul couldn't be here tonight. I would have liked the chance to be able to see him. Some of the people involved with this particular event I'd like to thank and recognize tonight. First of all, Norris MacDonald. So I first met Norris personally 3 years ago when he contacted me about the 50th anniversary of Formula One celebration that you had here at the auto show. He called me and asked me if I would like to attend the event. And of course I was astounded and very flattered to be asked to come out and be part of it. And I told him so, and I said, send me the details of the flight and the hotel, and I'm going to be there. And Norris came back and he said, well, Alan, we're not going to pay for your flight or your hotel to come out, but we've got some free passes for the auto show for you. So it's kind of like the same thing here this evening, except I'd like to say that things have gotten a little bit better, and that this year I got 3 passes for the auto show this year. So thank you, North. So Dr. Scully, chairman of the Hall of Fame, he was the one that contacted me in November asking me about this. And although he's not visible to motorsports, the fans, the drivers and the team owners are more so the high-profile people involved with it. His contributions to the sport are vast, and people such as Dr. Scully are so important, not only to associations and institutions such as this, but to motorsport and also. Thank you, Dr. Scully, for everything that you do. Also, in Dr. Scully's spare time, he's the professor of surgery and health policy at the University of Toronto, but I think that's kind of a side gig to what he's doing here with us. Joel Robinson, excuse me. Joel, thank you very much for putting together the beautiful tribute that you did here this evening. It was very appreciated. And thank you for returning the photos and the video afterwards as well, too. Norman Legault. Norman, Mr. Legault, where are you seated? Thank you, sir. I want to thank you for all of the free passes that you gave to me over the years to go to the Grand Prix. Do you remember that? No, you don't. You don't remember that at all. Because there was never any free passes to the Grand Prix. I always had to pay like everyone else going in there. But of course, that's one of the things that the Canadian Grand Prix is one of the best events on the Formula One calendar. So, thank you, sir. Never received the call. Gerald Donaldson, my friend, Jerry, who was with me at all of my Formula One races. We met and he traveled to all of those events, and he was my companion, my advisor, my friend, my running partner. We had some great times together, and I miss those times, Jerry. You haven't changed at all. I wish that we could still be doing those runs together. I miss those days of running with you. So I'm glad to see that you're inducted into the Hall tonight. I'd like to acknowledge Graham Jones. Of course, he's not here tonight. Graham also was in England at the time that I was racing, and he was someone that I could lean on, great support during my time over there. There was times in England that I was going through some difficult periods, and he was always there for me. So I'd like to acknowledge Graham tonight. Dan Proudfoot, wow, Dan, for someone from Toronto, you are incredibly gracious and kind to me, and I really appreciate all of the kind things that you said about me and help in my career. Is Cato Batista here tonight? Cato? Right there. I haven't seen you tonight, Cato. This gentleman, Cato Batista, sitting with Dan. Cato was instrumental and in my career and the races that I competed in Mexico. He first set up an introduction and an opportunity for me to do 5 races in Mexico, which led on to a career that spanned 9 years racing as a paid professional racing driver, and I accumulated some 30 victories, I think, and 4 team and drivers championships. I also met my wife in Mexico and resulted in my son, so Cato, you're responsible for all of this. Thank you, sir. Now, I missed one person here. I wanted to talk about Peter Lockhart. Now, I was Peter's driving instructor at the Mosport Racing School back, and I think it was like 1979 or 1980. And of course, Peter went on for a very long career in motorsport. We had a lot of races together, but as his instructor, I wanted to take the opportunity here to apologize for everyone for having Peter involved with the sport for such a long time. That's a bit of a dig, excuse me, Peter. Actually, Peter's amazing business acumen to be able to put together the business deals to have him race as a driver, operate his own teams, and support and mentor a lot of young drivers along the way. So thank you, Peter. A couple of people here tonight that also are special to me are Jim Bowie and his wife Karen. I don't know how well you would know of Jim, but Jim's a behind-the-scenes guy. He's been involved with motorsports for a very long time. He was instrumental in putting together the sponsorship package for one of Arie Luyendyk's 2 victories at the Indy 500. He's the marketing director of the team at that time. He worked in marketing and operations for another racing school, some guy named Skip Barber, at some point in time. During their heyday, when they had over 200 cars and they operated in racing schools across the country. And 2 years as the series manager for Formula BMW USA, and 5 years as the agency of record for Mazda North America. I don't really know what that means, but agency of record is, I think, means that he basically operated the show for the complete ladder system for Mazda USA and Mazda North America, from their grassroots racing all the way through. It's Jim that inducted me into this ceremony, into the Hall of Fame. So thank you very much for this, Jim. His wife Karen is here as well too. And having known Jim for a long time and traveled with him, Karen and Jim have been married for 40 years. And Karen, I salute you for your patience to be with Jim for all of those years. You deserve to be in the Motorsports Hall of Fame because of that accomplishment. And finally, I'm getting close to the end here, everyone. My wife, Erica. Okay. We met in Mexico, as I said, it was 20 years ago, I think. And she had no interest in motorsports whatsoever. And just over time, she's grudgingly become a bit of a racing fan. We met by coincidence, introduced by a friend many years ago. And in that coincidence, she actually saw me racing on TV when she was a child. I was in Formula One, so she remembers my racing on TV. She gave up we became a thing. She gave up a career in law and followed me to help me continue my dreams in being involved with motorsports. We moved to the United States, finally back together again, back to Canada again, and we went through some really, really tough times, and she was there with me all the way through. She was there for my last ever motor race when I retired on the podium and announced my retiring. She was there for me. She's always been there for me. And with that, we managed to come up with this young guy as well too, Alexander. And Alexander, I often tell people how great could it be to be Alan Berg's son, because he gets a chance to drive like a dozen race cars at the Laguna Seca track when he's down. We go to go-kart races all together and all kinds of cool places and be involved with really cool events such as this one here. But it's kind of difficult for a young fellow like this to be involved. The racing industry is a tumultuous business, and he's faced that already. I mean, he gets the pressure from his mom and dad to do well in school and do well in racing, not always in that order from his dad, but he's faced that, and he's going through that right now. And I believe that if a driver's inspiration comes from within, and a true great driver never really feels pressure from the outside, and that's one thing that is part of being a racing driver. And it's great to have my son come along. I've been able to start to live what my father experienced when we were involved with karting together, and had a great time doing that. So I'm almost at the end. I guess to wrap things up, I just want to say that it was told to me one time that statistically, there's a greater chance for a Canadian to become the Prime Minister of Canada than to become a Formula One racing driver. And I guess that's true. And there's two things that I've concluded out of that. First of all, I've had an amazing life. I'm so privileged to be able to have experienced what I have. And number two, we're all very fortunate that I never chose to take up a career in politics. So that's it for me. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Alan. Now, Alan at one time was looked upon as being a rising star. And several years ago, the Hall of Fame decided that a young, up-and-coming racing driver should be honored with the Rising Star Award that the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame would present. And to this point, we've done pretty well. We presented the Rising Star the first year to Lance Stroll. He's in Formula One. We presented the Rising Star to Nicholas Latifi. He's in Formula One. The Rising Star Award this year will go to a young man who has chosen a different form of racing, but he's showing every bit the amount of promise that those two previous winners showed at their age. So it's my pleasure to announce that the 2020 Rising Star Award from the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame goes to Raphael Lessard.
Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame rising star won his first race in a Honda Civic. The Quebec native has grown up and dominated in and around the Quebec short track scene as an ace stock car racer. Before most of us were old enough to secure our driver's license, this youngster was already impactful in ARCA, late models, NASCAR trucks, and the NASCAR Pinty Series. This season, he will race for Kyle Busch Motorsports in the NASCAR Truck Series. Please welcome this year's Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame rising star, Raphael Lessard.
Hi everyone. I would have liked to be with you guys tonight, but I'm racing my first NASCAR Truck Series race at Daytona this weekend with Kyle Busch Motorsport. So first of all, I would like to congratulate everyone that won an award this tonight, and also it's an honor for me, and I'm very excited to be winning the Rising Star Award and from the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame. I'm really happy, and I'm gonna do everything I can to perform as well as I can and give my 200% all year. And I hope you guys have an awesome night.
I met Raphael for the first time 2 years ago, and he couldn't speak a word of English, and he has been working hard to master a second language. And if he works as hard doing that as he does it with his car racing, he's going to be a success. We'll now resume our inductees from 2020, the next of which is Robin Buck.
Inductee started in karts in the early 1970s and continued in open wheel competition for the next 15 years in Formula Ford and Formula 2000 before becoming a dominant driver in the Players GM Series in 1986. He captured many victories over the next 6 seasons in the series, including the first shootout at Mont Tremblant in 1989 and the first Players GM race at the Vancouver Molson Indy in 1990. For the next several years, he stayed in the GM world as a Corvette development driver, setting an unofficial top speed at the Talladega Superspeedway in 1988. He also ran in the Escort Endurance Series and Corvette Challenge with John Powell Racing and Andy Evans. His career continued through the 1990s with his own racing team, competing in CASCAR and NASCAR Canada, as well as forays into Formula Atlantic and the Firestone Firehawk Series. Known for his ultra-competitive nature on the track, this inductee has played a significant role in the teaching and mentoring of new race drivers for the past 35-plus years, and continues in the sport he loves as a driver coach for several Canadian-based road circuit series. Please welcome to the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame, Robin Buck.
Did Alan cut into my time?
Take all the time you want. You brought your cheering section. You got to give them something.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, merci beaucoup. Thank you, and thank you, Norris MacDonald, for such a kind introduction. So here goes, 47 years in 7 minutes or less. And yes, I need the glasses. They're required to keep me on track, or it might take as long as Alan's. I'm so honored to be here tonight and grateful to be a recipient of a place in the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame. There are many thanks to be said, and that's just a warning. And I have to start off by thanking Larry Caruso for nominating me. Larry is a true, lifelong friend and now a co-inductee. I'd like to thank the Board of Directors for accepting my nomination and making me a part of such an elite group of distinguished individuals involved in Canadian motorsport. I would like to recognize and congratulate all the other inductees along with their families and friends who have made the journey with those of us before you tonight. While we stand up here as individuals, it is in fact really a group of effort that makes it possible for us to be here. Thank you to all my crew members, race teams, and their families who have supported me on this incredible journey. For me, a seemingly short 47 years. Without you and your endless efforts, this wouldn't have been a dream come true, which has been made even more special by having so many of you here tonight. A special thanks must go out to my late mom, Jenny, and dad, Derek, who are both very supportive. Okay, to be honest, my mother was really freaked out when I first started racing. She came to a race and I actually crashed. She saw I was okay, and that was okay with her. It's great to have my brother Jeremy here in attendance tonight, and my sister Laura has sent her congratulations from Maryland. To my daughter Samantha, who has taught me in life how important family is and what it means to have someone who has made me feel blessed from the day she arrived in this world. Sam would be here tonight, but she is out of province conducting a seminar as part of her PhD in nuclear physics. I love you, Sam. I know. In motorsport, there's always been three key aspects for me. One is definitely the competition, and number two is my family, and number three is the friendships with people who turn out to be your extended family. I was fortunate enough to move into Hoggs Hollow in Toronto at a very young age, and my new neighbors were the Rouse Prezes, Stephanie and Alfie, and some of you may know and remember their names as they raced at Mosport. Sorry, Ron and Carlos, I mean TCMP. I went to school with their youngest, Peter, and was only 8 years old when I first started going to the track with them, which led me going to the Canadian Grand Prix with my dad and my Uncle Bill. And that did it. I caught the racing bug. A few years later, I met a new friend, Fraser Bull, who is here tonight with his wife, Laura. Fraser has been a close friend and has worked on many of my race cars over the years. Thank you, Fraser. Through Fraser, I met his next-door neighbors, the Brownings, Ross and Robert. They were karters, and I went to watch the Brownings race and came home and announced to my dad that racing was what I wanted to do. I had my first kart at 12, thanks to my dad, and was racing at 13 and kept at it for about 6 seasons, winning some national titles along the way, and went on to represent Canada in international competition. Well, my dad was very concerned that I was way too focused on racing and not enough on school. So he made me a deal, and he said, I must graduate if I want to race. And if you do, I can attend the Jim Russell School in Mont Tremblant. So take note, any parents that want to keep their kids on track, both in school and in racing, it works, believe me. At Jim Russell, I was fortunate enough to have 2 mentors, James Bismar and Gilbert Pinot. Thank you to them for taking an interest in me at a young age and taking me to the next level. From there, I moved up to Pro Formula Ford and raced throughout Canada and the U.S. for Colin Hine Racing with Scott Goodyear as my teammate. I had raced against Scott in karts, but only really got to know Scott when we traveled together. Scott and I have many memories, including the time we were both arrested in the U.S. on the way to a race, but that's a story for later, maybe at the bar. As many of you know, my career has been very long in motorsport years, and has included racing dozens of different types of vehicles. I don't want to bore you with lists and stats, but I must take the time to recognize my many amazing sponsors and the people behind them who have made it possible for me to be here. When I first started racing in the Players GM Series back in 1986, my first 3 seasons were with John Powell Motorsport, and my teammate was no other than Peter Lecour. Peter, thank you for being such a great teammate and for all the great memories that we have. I must mention John, as working for him taught me how important sponsors are. And I was able to partner with Sony, as Bob McDonald and Marnix Van Gimmet, Esso, Roy Foss Motors, Drew Foss, Bob Johnson's Chevrolets, Jim Duckworth, which was really important for a racer like me, because I came from modest beginnings without deep pockets. And it was thanks to Drew Frost partnering with Pringles, that was Doug Ollinger and Kevin Lalonde, that I had a second 3 seasons in the Players GM Series. I then moved up to Formula Atlantic, which was a highlight in my career. I raced for Kanaska Racing, that was Victor Sifton, and I had David Empringham as my teammate, and David was awesome. And again, to have a sponsor like Faisal Royale, and that was Blair Rowlands, and yes, I had kitty cats on my Atlantic car, and they made it possible. Atlantic was a highlight because my roots were open wheel, and I always wanted to get back to my roots, not to mention that they were unbelievable cars to race. Luck and gratitude are two things that I am every day, and this gratitude extends to John Carmichael, who is here tonight. Without him, I don't think I'd be in this position, so thank you, John. I met John while helping organize a track event, and John had mentioned to me at the time it was too bad that he couldn't sponsor me in the Players GM Series because he owned a GM dealer. But he did say that if there was anything he could do in the future to help me out, to let him know. Well, 3 years later, I called John and I said, "It's Robin Buck, do you remember me?" And John was very polite enough and he said yes. And as they say, the rest is history. John has been instrumental in keeping me and my racing alive all these years. Through CASCAR and now NASCAR, my love for racing has continued, and the partnership with wonderful sponsors and chassis builders like Ken Stewart and Al Haringa, who are here tonight with their wives, Terry and Kim, the Pontiac Performance Team, that was John Carmichael, STP, David Pocock, UAP Napa, Carmen Bennett, Danny Belmore, Mike Handy, and Simon Weller, Ron's Burner Service, Ron White. Thorson Transportation, a special thanks goes to Dave, Adam, and Katie Thorndike, who are also here tonight. Durbody, thank you, Alan. Alan Shaw is here tonight. Active Green and Ross, Quaker State, Paul Siegel, thanks, Paul. FCA and the Ram brand, that's Mark McDonald and Joe Orlando. And most recently, Omvik, again, John Carmichael and Terry O'Keefe, who have all made it possible for me to stay in racing. FYI, I'm not done adding to this group and hope to be on track for 2020. Right, Ed? Where's Ed? He was trying to make a deal. So, Jamie, you might have another car on the track with you today. I mentioned the word family numerous times, and the world of motorsport is a definite family. Even though as a driver you race to win against every other driver on track, it's a different world in the paddock. If someone needs assistance, whether it be for parts or advice, they can always get it. But like any family, there are sometimes fights, and that keeps things interesting, right, Brandon? Yeah, you remember that. I have to admit that this really is a dream come true for me, and to be part of my life for so long and for so many years, I feel extremely fortunate, lucky, and grateful. So back to my top three. After all, when the competition by number one is done and mostly forgotten, it's number two, your family you remember, and the friendships, number three, that you've made along the way that last a lifetime. I take this opportunity to finally say thank you for this award, in which represents a lifelong achievement that I'm now starting only to realize as I take time to reflect. Thank you.
Our next inductee is Larry Caruso.
Our next inductee must have had the coolest mom when he was a teenager. You see, he was taking her big block Chevelle drag racing in the late 60s at St. Thomas. That was until his sister snitched on him, but the seed for racing was firmly planted. To the present day, he continues to play a role in Canadian motorsport with decades of driving, crewing, and team ownership of a wide variety of oval track and road circuit cars. Before racing in the Rothmans Porsche Series and the Players GM Series in the late 80s, before a first-place finish in the Firestone Firehawk Nationals at Mosport in '91, and before driving in the CASCAR Super Series, this inductee crewed for noted stock car racer and Canadian Motorsport Hall of Famer Earl Ross, including his NASCAR Winston Cup victory at Martinsville in 1974, still the only Canadian to win a race at the NASCAR Cup level. This inductee raced in the Western Legend Car Series from his Calgary base before returning to Ontario with a Porsche on road courses. In 2018, he placed first in class in his GT3 Cup car during the Can-Am Challenge at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park and continues racing the famous German marque as team and program manager and driver for Road Sport Aerial Limited. This inductee has been behind the scenes mentoring new drivers as a coach and instructor in the Nissan Micra Cup Series, the Ultra 94 Porsche GT3 Challenge Cup Series, and the NASCAR Pinty Series. Along with motorsport, he's an accomplished pilot and has been a member of the Canadian Ski Instructors Alliance for over 40 years. Please welcome into the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame, Larry Caruso.
Wow, what a night, let me tell you. First, I'd like to start off and just thank everybody out here in the audience for coming out and supporting the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame. I'd also like to send out a very, very special thanks to all the members of the selection committee in Canada that voted for me, making this great honor possible. Special people help make special things happen. I'd like to acknowledge my two sisters, Anna Marie and Michelle, who have supported me throughout my whole career for both work and racing. Sandra D'Angelo and Jamie Ford worked very hard on my induction document, making sure that everything was exact and complete. Your teamwork helped get me here to the Hall of Fame. For those of you that know me, know it's been a long road. It hasn't been a straight road. There's been a lot of twists and turns and even a few dead ends. But I was able to get it into reverse, put it back in gear, and here I am tonight. Every successful race car driver I've ever spoke to said, you can't get to where you are without the help and support of other people. Brian Cowie, President and CEO of Centura Tile, has been a friend of mine since junior high school and a key sponsor of my racing for 34 years. I have a special thanks to Brian because he sponsored my guest list for tonight's induction ceremony. So thanks, Brian. Unfortunately, he's in Daytona watching the races. Okay? I ran my first ASN FIA sanctioned race, like Robin, in 1986, driving that number 40 Camaro in the Players Limited GM Motorsports Series in Sanair Speedway, driving for Beery Racing. The following year, I ran 5 races in the Rothmans Porsche Series, but that summer, 1988, they made the announcement that the Rothmans Porsche Turbo Cup Series was coming to Canada with a full television package. What did I do? I walked down to Ludwig Heimrath's trailer and I introduced myself. And I said, Mr. Heimrath, if I could find us a car owner and if I could find a sponsor for us both, would you take me under your wing and we could run a 2-car team? So in his good old German way, he said, you go see what you can do, come on back and we can talk. Well, I came back with a car owner. I came back with sponsorship from Centura Tile, Bell Mobility, Nokia Mobira, and the Hard Rock Cafe, and we've been together ever since. We went on to win racing in the races in the Firestone Firehawk Series. We put back-to-back championships to kick off the 1996 season in the Valvoline Touring Car Championship, went on to win the series title in the final race of the year, pulling off a 29-second driver change. Ludwig taught me how to run a race team, how to drive Mosport. He taught me how he sets up a race car, which I'm not allowed to tell, and he taught me how to win a championship. Ludwig, I can't thank you enough for everything you've done. You're a true friend and a teammate forever, all right? Verna and Robert Brink, they came in from Calgary to support me here tonight. I met Robert in 1992 when our family was transferred out to Calgary. Robert became my crew chief for my Legends Car program and my Cast Car Super Series team. We built that team with full sponsorship from Chrysler Credit, Mopar, and Dodge Trucks of Canada. Our limited program brought us some good results, but most memorable was the 1999 Mopar 500, where we were the only Western Series car to break the track qualifying record and became home the #1 or highest finishing Dodge for that event. I mentioned I found a car owner I didn't want to forget. Billy Smolowski was the first call I ever made. I called on him, I showed him the Rossman's Porsche Series overview, he liked it, and we moved forward. Stephen Whitney, who's here tonight representing Engineered Automotive, and Billy have had my back for 32 years, and at times they've created miracles keeping me on track. I can't thank you both enough for all your help and your continued support. Chris and Annetta Gauthier, owners of the Road Sport Auto Group and the Canadian distributors for the Ariel Adams race cars in Canada. Unfortunately, they could not be here tonight. They're out of town at a dealer meeting. But our Ariel Adams team has won back-to-back championships in the Pirelli GT Sprints for 2018 and 2019 with lead driver Daniel Bois. I was able to put together a third-place finish in 2018 and a second-place finish in 2019 to finish off the year. I just want everybody to know the road doesn't end here. Our plans for 2020 are to run for a third consecutive championship with Daniel, continue to build the Canadian Road Racing Academy Limited with business partner Daniel Bois, training the NASCAR, Gander Outdoor Series and RV stores, their drivers that come up to race in the Canadian, Chevrolet Silverado 250 at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park every August. In closing, I would just like to say that I would like to thank Dr. Scully and his team for all their hard work on putting on this event. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, Larry. That was terrific. Our next inductee is Ed Hawkinson.
This inductee came all the way down from South Porcupine to try his hand at drag racing in 1956 and then learned how to race on a track with corners at Pinecrest Raceway just outside of Toronto. Stricken with polio as a child, he never let this disabling disease slow him down at all. With his Northern Ontario roots, he went snowmobile racing. His success in the 250cc class was noted by Arctic Cat. He became the firm's first factory-based rider competing in Canada and the U.S. He was also a founder of the Canadian Snowcross Racing Association. In the late 1970s and early 80s, he was also involved with the Yamaha motorcycle racing effort in Canada. About the same time, he started a racing apparel company, building it into one of the top suppliers throughout North America with the Chaco and Fast Eddie brands. In the early 1980s, he began to sponsor and mentor teams in the countrywide CASCAR Super Series, fielding successful teams and drivers such as Canadian Motorsport Hall of Famer Peter Gibbons, along with Kelly Williams and Dan Shirtliff, to prominent racing careers. His involvement with oval track racing as a team owner since 2001 continues to this day, working with daughter Jamie and son-in-law Jason Hathaway in the NASCAR Pinty Series. For his passion and dedication to the sport in a wide variety of roles, please welcome into the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame, Ed Hawkinson.
Marketing 101. Thank you, Kubota. To the Motorsports Hall of Fame, Chairman of the Board, Dr. Scully, thank you for the phone call in November. It wasn't expected, but it was of high gratitude that I had after I spoke with you. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I would like to congratulate the other inductees tonight, some of which I know very close and some not so close, but when you're in the motorsport industry, you're really close to everybody. Gary Magwood, the guy with the funny dress just up 3 steps or 4 steps there. Robin Buck. What a heck of a presentation Robin made. Larry Caruso, been around those folks for a long time. Alan Berg and I made an agreement at the back. He said he was going to talk a long time, so he said, I probably need some space from somebody else, so my speech is over about now. Norman Legault and Bruno Spangler, of course, congratulations to you. I'm proud to be in your company. My storied background is that I'm surrounded by strong ladies and men who helped me flourish in the auto industry. My mother, who's sitting up here in the high buck seats up there, and my brother, who is here tonight, decided to move me from Timmins to Toronto way back when, because I was a victim of poliomyelitis at 3 months of age. She gambled that the doctors and nurses at the Hospital for Sick Children would make me much more mobile. After 13 operations, mobility was and is much better. My love of motorsports came early in life with my first 55 Chev convertible at 15 years of age. My mother asked how I got it home. I said I drove it. My right foot was fine, and it controls the gas pedal. The left foot, not so much, but who wants to brake anyway? After a few years of racing snowmobiles, I partnered with Peter Gibbons in the late model stock car circuit that we ran in Ontario and in Ohio. Peter was an accomplished driver. Winning races became a natural position for Pete, and Heidi and I's company that we just formed, Choco Motorsports, got great notoriety because Pete was on television a lot and a lot of print media. In 1999, we started our own Team 3 Red and the desire to compete in the Cast Car Series. Heidi and I, and our oldest daughter, Jamie, would select who drove for Team 3. We've had some great drivers. Chris Fowler was our first driver, and he was a military brat and went back into the military. Bill Rouse, Stu Robinson, DJ Kennington, who's one of the top drivers, of course, in the Pinty Series, drove for us for a year. Cole Powell drove for us 2 years ago. And 7-time Cast Car champion Don Thompson also drove for Team 3. The driver shuffle stopped when Jason Hathaway came on board. Fresh from winning the Delaware Sportman ranks, we brought Jason into Team 3. Jason does not only pilot the Team 3 car up till today in the Pinty Series, but also became a family member when he married my daughter, our daughter, Jamie, in 2016. Apparently, a village is needed to allow a race team to be successful. Not true. A big bag of money is what you need. And then you need to keep filling that bag of money. However, having an organization to race within is just as important. Tony and Linda Novotny created and nurtured the Cast Car Series in Canada as our governing body. On a few occasions as a car owner, I would disagree with Tony, maybe more than a few occasions. However, Tony's vision moved us forward each year. The word respect is not lost when speaking of Tony and Linda Novotny. Tony, thank you for not kicking me out of your series. We also tuned into drag racing with the Payton family. They had an alcohol funny car out of Paris, Ontario. The very positive item that grew out of that relationship was that Tony Payton had a brother, Todd, who was driving the race car, but Tony was more business orientated. And Tony with his wife Lisa, Linda I think was the first one though. So Tony with his wife Lisa, there we go, moved from Brantford, Ontario up to Newmarket and joined our Fast Eddie group. And I think we're approaching 15 years or so, and Tony's still with us today. Hard to believe, eh, Tony? Media is crucial, of course, to our sport. We were always starved for recognition in the stock car racing. The late John Massingberg and Dean McNulty began to change that. John, Dean, Eric Thomas, of course, and Bruce Mellenbacher, who is here about the fifth row up, had a vision that has grown and grown and grown. Currently, Eric Thomas of Raceline Radio gets the word out. Jim Robinson, and now Jim's son, Joel Robinson, brought us into the television coverage. That was what really gave us the boost in the CASCAR series. In print, Inside Track News, the owner, Greg McPherson and David Weber, open up the magazine coverage that has been second to none. All you have to do is pick up one of their magazines and you can see that these folks are definitely integrated into our system of racing in Canada. In addition, the Canadian AutoShow, the Motorama, is held at the Toronto International Centre, and it is also owned by the Inside Track Media Group. They do a great job. Of course, Norris MacDonald commands great reading in the wheels section of the Toronto Star. I don't think I've ever seen my name in there, but maybe down the road. We can supply pictures and whatever you'd like, Norris. All joking aside, Norris simply gets it. He's a performance gentleman. He understands what we're about when we try to put a race car on the track, try to put a team together, and very few people understand it like Norris. Thank you, Norris.
Thank you.
Hey, Berg, am I getting close to your time? Where would we be without sponsors? Robin Buck alluded to it. I took down some of those names, Robin, so I hope you don't mind if I call them. The propellant of our motorsports is our sponsors. Team 3 has had many great sponsors over the years and continues with great sponsor going into 2020. We've had Snap-on Tools. How can you get a better sponsor than that? I'll tell you in a minute. Ray Bestis Brakes and Rockstars. Williamson's of Uxbridge, a GM dealership that took the time to get involved with our sport. We had to commit to about 25 car purchases to do that, but it was okay. And the great Canadian company, Napoleon Barbecues, out of Barrie, Ontario, have been really solid supporters of our team in the past. Going into the 2020 season, we're happy to announce that Kubota Canada is back as a primary sponsor, and Rob Allison is here tonight. And our team has gone from Team 3 Red to Team 3 Orange. For year number 2, Rob has managed and driven the marketing side of Kubota Canada. But Rob is much more than a sponsor. He's a business associate and a friend of our family. It didn't start out that way because we didn't have a long-term relationship. But Rob likes the way we do things, and we like the way he does things. Can it get any better than that? I don't think so. We love consistency in our race platforms. To do this, we need long-term, top-caliber builders. We need a setup crew and a sharp, over-the-wall gang. Craig Masters is our crew chief. Our whole group is here tonight. Gary Mead is our car chief. Jeff Thomas is our setup tech. Our associates that work with those folks are Ben Carswell, Don Brock, our hauler driver, Phil Arnold, Rich Hischer, who looks after our tires, and Jeff Gutler, who tells Jason when to turn left on the racetrack. Thank you for your time and expertise. Without you, we're just another team. With you, we win races. Here's the most important part: family. I did not need a village to bring me into this sport. In fact, it took my family support. My wife of 45 years and our 4 children all helped in their own way. Heidi and I have 2 daughters and 2 sons. To Brad Hawkinson and Leslie, to Brett Hawkinson and wife Erica, to Jessica Hackert and husband Kevin, to Jamie Hawkinson and husband Jason, thank you for being great kids and supporting me in motorsports and helping me get to this event tonight. In closing, I'd like to express my gratitude to IndyCar driver and really good friend Scott Goodyear, to Tony Novotny of CASCAR, and longtime friend Ken Van, owner of the Canadian Snowcross Racing Association. Scott Goodyear texted me from Indianapolis last week and said, "Welcome to the club." He also said, "Enjoy the ride." I will. Thank you very much.
Ed gave me a whole bunch of jokes to tell, which I will not tell. Great racing family. Our next inductee is Normand Legault.
Our next inductee was instrumental in securing a Canadian presence for the top echelon in motor racing. Formula One and IndyCar races take a great deal of planning, organization, and some political maneuvering, and this inductee used his business acumen to operate the Canadian Grand Prix starting in 1981 and continuing for the next 27 years. Not only did he promote F1 and NASCAR's Busch Series at Montreal Circuit Jeux Villeneuve, he promoted kart and champ car at Mont Tremblant for several seasons. His interest in racing began with trips with his father to major racing events, and after graduating from university, went to work for Labatt, Quebec as its motorsport sponsorship manager. In 1989, he became general manager of the Canadian Grand Prix at the request of then F1 boss Bernie Ecclestone. Throughout the 1990s and into the 2000s, he secured title sponsorships for the Grand Prix with Players Limited and Air Canada in presenting Canada's most prestigious motorsport event through his work as CEO of GPF1 and Formula One Grand Prix du Canada. For his efforts in establishing Canada on the international stage with capacity crowds and positive economic impact with the F1 Canadian Grand Prix, please welcome to the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame, Normand Legault.
Monsieur Legault will be inducted by Francois Dumontier, the current promoter of F1 Grand Prix Canada.
Good evening. I'm a lucky man, privileged man, in fact. Privileged to be here tonight with all of you and fellow inductees who I wish to congratulate. Honored to be part of such a select group of individuals here tonight and over the years. Privileged because, and at the risk of sounding corny to you, the Lord was good to me. As a kid, as was mentioned in the video, my dad would take me to the races, starting at age 8, and go see, those of you, some of you might remember, Don Garlitz at Napierville, see drag racing. I would go to Tremblant in the mid-60s to see the very first, wasn't even called Can-Am at the time, but see the very first Can-Ams. See the very first Canadian Grand Prix at Tremblant in 68 and 70. And then traveling, coming over to Mossport, sleeping in the car to see guys like Jackie Stewart, who was an idol. And I was such a fan, loved it, had a passion for the sport, like many of you here tonight. Never would have I dared dream that one day I could work in this field. And as was said previously, I ended up in motorsport a bit by accident. I was, as a young man, after graduating, working for Labatt's in the sponsorship division. And one day, my boss calls me in his office, says, we have a new program, you'll be looking after this. Okay, what's up? Says, we're sponsoring the Canadian portion of Formula Atlantic. It'll be called the Labatt's Challenge. And we'll be sponsoring a young Canadian driver by the name of Gilles Villeneuve. You look after him. So I kind of escorted Gilles to the races in 1976, 1977. And then when a decision was made by the powers that be that the Formula One race would be held in Montreal, and there was a circuit that needed to be built, which Roger Peart, who I salute, designed in Montreal. I was responsible for sponsorship, promotion, at a time when most Quebecers couldn't tell a Formula One car from a snowmobile. We really had talk about educating your customer, educating the fans, and which I did for 3 years, for the very first 3 years of the Grand Prix Montreal, 78, 79, and 80. And then in 81, the then president of Labatt's Breweries, Pierre Desjardins, decided to appoint me general manager of the subsidiary. It was wholly owned subsidiary of Labatt's Breweries. And Pierre appoints me, bottom line accountability, you're the boss. At the ripe old age of 25, youngest employee in the company. And he says, by the way, if Mayor Drapeau was legendary mayor of Montreal, if Mayor Drapeau asks your age, tell him you're 30. You'll be too insecure if you realize you're only 25. So I must have been 30 for about 8 years. And 1981, my first event as general manager, I got to start negotiations with a gentleman by the name of Bernie Ecclestone, who didn't like it too much, was calling my boss saying, who's that cocky kid you've sent me? He thinks he can dictate the terms of our agreements. Well, you know, when you're young and naive, you think you can dictate the terms of the agreement with Bernie. So, lo and behold, I ran the event for 3 years up until 1983, my last year, decided that I wanted to do something else. And I went and worked with the Montreal Alouettes Football Club. And then in 1989, they got a call from Bernie, who has sort of taken over the race in Montreal under Molson's sponsorship. And Bernie says, why don't you come work for me? So I said, why should I? Because I can make it worth your while. I said, interesting. So I ended up working for Bernie for a number of years. And kind of like the shaver guy, I liked the Grand Prix so much that I ended up buying the company. And over all these wonderful years, I was at a direct involvement in the Canadian event, 25 years, 22 as the general manager, president, promoter, call it what you want. I had, and if I'm not mistaken, I think it must be 12 years on the Formula One Commission. Ended up sitting with Jackie Stewart, and even in the beginning, Colin Chapman, and some of these legendary figures, Ken Terrell, which explains why I consider myself extremely privileged to have been able to work and make a living and make friends in a domain that was a passion, make lifelong friends, guys like Francois Dumontier, who I recruited, I dare say, as a kid, and today looks after what was my baby for a while and does a super, super job. I'm extremely proud, not only of the Canadian Grand Prix, but proud of what Francois does with it. And I thank him for being here tonight. I'm very happy to be able to share this moment with him. So it's been a hell of a ride. It's been a great ride. I've always loved motorsport, still love it. I'm still involved in motorsports in 2012, along with partners, the Canada Pension Plan, and a private equity called Bridgepoint. The three of us got together and we acquired the MotoGP World Championship, which is basically Formula One on two wheels. We also acquired the World Superbike Championship, and I still spend weekends by the side of racetracks. And it's been great. I've seen so many great young drivers. Bruno Spangler here, we were reminiscing. I met Bruno when he was, I'll say, still a teen, racing Formula Renault in Europe. Before that, doing racing karts with the son of a lifelong friend of mine. In 2001, I was honored to be honorary chairman of a round of the World Championship of Karting in Saint-Roch-L'Achigan. And we had kids, obviously, racing there. Kids by the name of Lewis Hamilton, Nico Rosberg, Vitantonio Liuzzi, along with, of course, great local talent. So it is a passion. It is a lifelong passion. I've been privileged to also meet with great Canadian drivers. They've all been named here. Alan Berg, which I congratulate for his nomination. Of course, Jacques Villeneuve, the brother. Patrick Carpentier, I could go on and on. And when I decided to take a leave from motorsports, wanted to do something else, still stay involved in the sports with the Montreal Alouettes and I wasn't involved in the sport from 83 to 89 for 6 years. Sports was still a passion, but there was something missing. And that little something was the real fire inside that motorsport's always been for me. So I thank you all for being here tonight. I want to thank the Hall of Fame. I want to thank you, who has been more than a colleague, I dare say a friend, and gave me that call not so long. Thanks you for this. I want to thank Norris. Norris is the classiest act you can find. Norris is the embodiment of motorsport in Canada, motorsport coverage. Thank you, Norris. It's always been a pleasure. And I'd be remiss if I did not mention how sorry I am I could not provide Alan with tickets for the race in Montreal. When Alan raced for Ocella in 1986, if I'm not mistaken, I would have had to buy them because I was with the Montreal Alouettes. But had I known, I would have gladly have bought them for him because he deserved it. So thank you so much. Have a great evening, and thanks for being here.
Our next inductee is Gary Magwood.
This ambassador of the sport has earned the respect and recognition of the Canadian auto racing world in a variety of roles. From competing on circuits throughout North America, to organizing and presenting racing seminars, to operating racing and high-performance driving schools, to instituting scholarships for winter driving instruction through colleges and universities across Canada, to writing about the sport in prominent publications. But our next inductee is also to be remembered as a co-founder of the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame itself in 1993. This inductee started racing in 1967 with a 2-liter sports racer, then in Formula Ford, where he won the 1970 Series Championship. After that, he was on to Formula B and Formula Atlantic competition in the early 1970s, while also operating a racing school at Mosport, now Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. In the early 1990s, he competed with the Track Tech racing team and its Toyota MR2 Turbo with success, including a class win at the 1992 Toronto Molson Indy. Our inductee has also worked to promote the sport with driving conferences in Toronto and Vancouver with F1 legend and fellow Canadian Motorsport Hall of Famer, Sir Jackie Stewart. With this very impressive resume and presenting the sport of auto racing to many Canadians on so many levels, please welcome into the institution he helped establish, the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame, Gary Magwood.
Lose my way, give me a call. Hi. What a delight to be here. It's been a while. Alan, thank you for taking up most of the evening. You know, this whole Hall of Fame thing, actually, it was a very interesting development because it came about strictly as an idea. A guy called Lee Abrahamson just said to me one day, "Why isn't there a Motorsport Hall of Fame in Canada?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." So we put a dinner together, and the rest has been history. And I look around now, and I look at the inductees over the years, and it's been fun to watch. And to say that I'm delighted to be included in the inductees now is what kind of statement can I say? I got to start by thanking Mike Adams from Regina, for he actually took the time and effort to nominate me. And then the Hall of Fame Board, of course, for approving my inclusion into the roster of Canadian and international racing personalities. I'm working from a little tiny cell phone here, guys, so be patient. I'd like to mention a few mentors who, over the years, offered me guidance and advice, both inside and outside of motor racing. A guy called John Dobbins. Some of you may never have heard of John. He was a crusty Irishman. He owned a BP station on Yonge Street, and he and I became partners. What I learned from Dobbins was that a well-placed blow with a ball-peen hammer could fix an awful lot of problems in a race engine. And that was something that stuck with me. I don't know, he showed up at the gas station, BP station on Yonge Street, 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm in tears. I'm rebuilding my twin cam engine, this damn thing. I have torqued it down. It won't spin. I torqued it down. I take it apart. I put it back together. I check the bearings, check the clearing. And every time I torqued it down, I couldn't spin that crank. And Dobbins showed up. I don't know what the hell he was doing out on the road at 2 o'clock in the morning. He walks in and says, "So what's the problem, Magwood?" And I said, "Oh, Dobbins," and I said, "I can't get this." He says, "Stand by for a second there." He walks over to the bench, picks up the biggest ball-peen hammer in the shop, and I said, "No, Dobbins, don't hit it, don't hit it." And he wails on the end of the crankshaft, spun like a top. One of those valuable lessons. A guy called Higgs Murphy, who fabulous engine builder extraordinaire and fierce racing driver, who is currently suffering from terminal brain cancer. Higgs was one of these people I'm sure an awful lot of folks in here remember, both on track as an insane racing driver, but also probably one of the preeminent engine builders, who wound up becoming a log builder. Go figure. They worked together. Craig Fisher, familiar name. Craig, who offered his extensive knowledge and expertise when it came to, for me to teach racing and driving. He was a phenomenal teacher. He had an incredible insight into what drivers can and can't do. And as many of you know, he's obviously an inductee into the Hall of Fame, but he was one of those very quiet, shy guys. But put a steering wheel, put him on a race car, he was one fierce competitor. Quiet, you'd never know. Steps off the track, you'd say, librarian. He was great. And I've got to mention a guy called Len Coates, who has been inducted as a media. And Where do I start with Lenny? I haven't got as much time as Berg, right? So I can't cover Lenny too well. But here's the Lenny thing. Lenny always said he was a great character. We shared an apartment together in Toronto. And as many of you know, he was a party boy. And he came in one day and he said, "Damn, Magwood, if I'd known I was going to live this long, I would never have used my body as a theme park." You know. Anyway, that was my friend Lenny. You know, I just want to relate a short tale. We look at motor racing today, and you know, the drivers are not accessible anymore. There was a time when you could stand at the piss trough at Mosport and have Sifford on one side and Gurney on the other. You know, that doesn't happen anymore because they're in the motorhomes. It's all big businesses, multi-jillions of dollars and all that. But a very cool guy who we brought over to Canada, and you recognize his name, for the first Hall of Fame, which we did in '93. He was our guest. And a guy called John Surtees. I approached Sterling Moss originally, unsuccessful. He wanted too much money, but I contacted John Surtees, who agreed readily to come over to Canada to be our guest of honor, first Hall of Fame dinner here in Toronto in 1993, but he also was our Grand Marshal for the Vintage Auto Sprints that we did at Christie. Delightful man. The only guy in the world who won world championships on 2 wheels and 4. That's it, nobody else. I picked him up at the airport, he and Jane, for the ride to Hamilton, where we were organizing the first Vintage Auto Sprints. And I left the airport, swung onto the highway, and I said, "John, would you rather drive? I kind of feel a little intimidated here with you sitting, riding shotgun." And he said, No. He said, "You're doing fine, just carry on." And very diplomatic man. So after spending a few days shepherding him around and between Christie and the Hall, I got to know a bit more about his life and career. He was a gentleman. He mixed easily with his many fans. And his parting words were a big thanks for our hospitality, and if you ever find yourself on the other side of the Atlantic, please let me know and come for a visit. You don't get that out of F1 drivers too often, no? So I pitched up about a year later, and I drove up to into the driveway. It's a lovely country house. Knocked on the door. Jane answered and said, "Oh, yeah, he's in the shop, in the workshop." So sure enough, I go out there. Here he is. 7-time world motorcycle champion, right? Once Formula One. He's out in this garage. I walk in. There's a row of MV Augustas and all kinds of motorcycles and stuff. And he's working on a couple of Amel carburetors, you know, covered in crud. And you go, this guy, like world champion. Anyway, he was puttering around in his shop, which he loved doing. And he said, so I said, you know, in the house, we went in the house for tea. And then I was getting ready to head back to London, and he invited me to join, he and Jane, and a couple of other folks for dinner at a pub that just happened to be on the road back to the main highway. Now here's the important part of this tale. Am I catching up with Alan yet?
You're getting close.
I'm close? Good. You haven't got a hook, though. I don't know why you don't have a hook here. Anyway, the important part of this tale, Surtees says to me, "Just follow me." And he climbs into his Mitsubishi SUV. Okay, narrow winding English country road with hedgerows on both sides. What could go wrong? I thought, as long as I watched his brake lights, John's brake lights, and responded accordingly, I could hustle the rental car, the rental Focus, to keep up with Surtees in his Mitsubishi. But I sensed that his braking points, and racing drivers out there will appreciate this, his braking points were getting a little later. And further down the road, the further down the road we got, the inevitable happened when I reacted fraction too slow, got on the brakes too late, and off I went, understeered into the hedges on the side of the road. Okay, damn, a few scratches. I backed the car out, and not serious damage, but I've lost him and have no idea where the hell I am. Rightly chagrined, I drove on, and lo and behold, about a half a mile down the road, this is Surtees, was the pub with John and Jane standing next to their car, to the Mitsu in the parking lot. "Any problems, Gary?" he says, with a big, kind of a, not quite a smile on his face, and knowing full well that I'd headed off into the hedge. And I said, "No, not at all, John. You know, that was a pleasant drive and country drive, and thank you very much for dinner. Goodbyes, and back to London." So a very different era when you realize that the F1 drivers were accessible, available in the paddock, and today, of course, they're quite shielded and surrounded by, whatever. But I say thank you for the experience of motor racing. It's been a hoot. It was a long time ago, and I am delighted to be here tonight to accept this award, and thank you all very much for attending and being incredibly patient. Appreciate your patience.
They keep giving me the hurry up sign, or I could talk for 20 minutes about Gary Magwood and Len Coates, but I won't. Our next inductee is Bruno Spangler.
In 1996, at the age of only 13, our next inductee climbed into a cart, promptly won the cadet championship, and he's never looked back. He continues to not only race, but continues to proudly represent Canada internationally. After competing in karts, he raced in the Formula Renault Championship with Graf in 2001, with several victories and a championship before competing in European Formula 3 in 2003 and 2004. In 2005, he began to race in the prestigious DTM, or Deutsche Touringwagen Masters, the German-based touring car series which competes on road courses in Europe. For the next 7 seasons, driving a Mercedes, this inductee garnered 9 victories and was second in series points in 2006 and 2007. Switching to BMW in 2013, he continues to be a dominant driver in DTM, with trips to race in the endurance events at Sebring, Daytona, and Le Mans in the Team Rahal Letterman Lanigan GTLM class BMW. He finished second in the 2015 Rolex 24 at Daytona, and in 2012 won the DTM Championship, winning the last race of the season to secure the title. He was then offered a test ride in a BMW Formula E car and is the backup driver for the Andretti BMW FE team, along with his DTM driving duties. He proudly represents Canada with a maple leaf on his racing helmet and fire suit. Please welcome into the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame, the secret Canadian, Bruno Spangler.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think I got about 15 seconds left, right?
Probably.
I gotta make it short. I'm very proud and very happy to be here. It's also great to see so many nice people here. As I've heard tonight, motorsport is a family. But within that family, of course, there are people you want to see again in your career, and there are people you don't want to see again in your career. And the ones that are here tonight is the one I want to see again. So it's great to be here, to see Normand Legault, that saw me when I was a kid, racing go-karts, definitely. Also Jeff Papone, we've done some great interviews together. He really understands what racing is about, and it's always great to talk to people that understand what racing is about. We had a great breakfast with you this morning, Norris. It was amazing. It's just, I'm very, very proud to be here. Thank you very much for having me here. I started racing when I was a kid. I was 10 years old. But before that, when I was 5, 6 years old, I just loved cars. I loved racing, but just cars in general. And when I was sitting in the back seat with my parents, I knew every kind of cars. I knew this is a BMW, this is a Mercedes, I was so fascinated about cars, and I was always telling my dad to drive faster. I was always pushing him. Overtake this guy on the right, overtake this guy on the left, push, drive fast, you can't drive, you're so slow. And after that, at some point, he said, okay, you look like you want to race, you're going to try a go-kart. And then after that, he thought, he's going to have a break about it because I'm going to be scared or something because go-karts are fast. But unfortunately for him, I fell in love with it. And that was the beginning of a long go-kart. I did 7 years of go-karts. Then I went to cars. And then in 2005, I started DTM. 15 years of DTM. I'm not going to go over these 15 years, of course. But I'm very, very proud to be here. Thank you again for having me here. Also, thank you because this event is very close to Valentine's Day. And my wife is here with me. And I think in the last 8 years, I was never at home for Valentine's Day. We were never together. And now, after 8 years, we make it together. So thank you for making that event close to Valentine's Day. And I want to wish you, everyone here, a nice evening. Have some drinks tonight. It's time to celebrate. And thank you for this award. I will remember this for all my life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruno, which I think was the shortest speech of the evening. I will now call on Dr. Scully to do some closing remarks.
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've had a remarkable display of great talent in many areas tonight, and certainly personally, I'd like to congratulate all of the inductees. You're all very well-deserving, and all of the people in the teams and families that have supported you. We do have one other category that we created about a decade ago, and that is the international category, where we take somebody who is not Canadian, not from Canada, but who has contributed an immense amount to motorsport in Canada and has worked with many of the people in the room. We go back to Carroll Shelby at a magnificent affair, and others include Sir Jackie Stewart. I had the great privilege of working with Sid and Jackie in the whole motorsport safety area. Good friend Nigel Mansell in terms of Formula One and IndyCar. The Andrettis, Mario, always colorful, special guest last year. Michael Andretti, who won more of the Toronto races than anyone else. We had Bobby Rahal, my best friend in life and partner as we pursued the whole issue of medical and rescue safety in the world, Professor Sid Watkins. Then we've recognized also a different category. We had Honda several years ago, and we had Magna International and legendary motor company with Peter Kloot, who had provided great support for Canadian motorsport and were well known internationally. And as we've heard, we had McLaren Racing and the great privilege of the evening the other night with those luminaries, and spending the day with Johnny Rutherford was really a remarkable experience. I'd like to thank everybody for being here. You've been very patient in your listening, and I would like you to join with me and thank our Master of Ceremonies, Norris, who's done a great job. And Norris always has a few housekeeping items to finish off. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Yes, just a couple of reminders. The silent auction will be open for, I believe, another 20 or 25 minutes, so be sure to bid high and bid often. The cash bar is open, and I would remind the inductees to please come to the front so that we can have some group pictures. And anybody who wants autographs or just wants to chat with the inductees, you're welcome to do so. So if you're leaving, going home, safe home tonight, and hope to see you all here again next year. Special thanks to Jason Campbell and the Canadian International AutoShow. It's been a wonderful evening. Good night.